Hello, Beaufort Middle School students. Today we are going to begin Unit 3, entitled Ratios and Proportional Relationships. We're going to start with Lesson 1, entitled Ratios. We would like for you to please fill in your guided notes as you view this presentation. Have fun! In this unit, you will learn about ratios and extend the concept to rates and unit rates, and then to solving proportions and to scale drawings. Students will also explore the relationships between rate and the slope of a line. Let's start with a scenario from the real world. Baseball. How can you compare a baseball team's wins to its losses during spring training? Here we have a graph that compares different 2001 spring training teams and their wins and losses. We're going to use this real-world example to explore ratios. Please fill in the vocabulary on your guided notes. A ratio uses division to compare two numbers. There are three ways to write a ratio of two numbers. Before we move on, please note the word compare. A ratio is simply a comparison between two things. Let's talk about different ways to write a ratio. First, you can write a ratio using words. The second way you can write a ratio is using numbers. And the third way is by using algebra. If we look at the previous table and focus on the LA Dodgers, we can see where we're getting these examples. We're going to first compare wins to losses. Using numbers, you would just plug in the wins first and the losses second. As a fraction, you would write the wins in the numerator's position and the losses in the denominator's position. So we've got 18 to 13. And then finally with the colon, wins comes first, losses come second, and you want your numbers to reflect that as well. All three ways of writing the ratio of two numbers are read the ratio of A to B. So we would say 18 to 13. Two ratios are equivalent ratios when they have the same value. Let's try an example. Let's make a comparison about game players from the Cubs. First, let's start with wins to losses. We're going to write our answer into three different forms. First, you can write it using the colon. So we would say 17 colon 14. Notice the question asks us to go from wins to losses, so we wrote the wins first to losses second. Another way you could write it is using the fraction version, which would be 17 over 14. The third way you could write it is using words. We would say 17 to 14. Next, we're going to do the wins to the total games played. Our wins are 17 and the total games played are 17 plus the 14 losses, so that's a total of 31. We're going to write 17, that's the number of games that were won, compared to the total, which is 31. As a fraction, we would write 17 to 31, and finally using words, 17 to 31. Your turn. Now try to use the table above to write the ratios for the Padres. You may choose how you write it, either using words or numbers. Press pause and try these three problems. Now check your answers. Wins to losses would be, for the Padres, notice we're looking at the Padres. Here's our wins and losses, would be 16 to 11. Wins to games played, we would combine the wins and losses for a total of 27 games played. So our ratio for number 2 should be 16 to 27. And then finally our losses to wins, 11 to 16. Again, you can write it using the colon, the fraction bar, or the word 2. Example 2. This example is about amusement parks. Let's read it together. A ride on a roller coaster lasts 2 minutes. Suppose you wait in line for 1.5 hours to ride the roller coaster. Follow the steps below to find the ratio of time spent in line to time spent on the ride. Well, our first step is to write hours as minutes so that the units are the same. So we have 1 hour plus half an hour. So that's going to be equal, we've got 60 minutes in 1 hour plus 30 minutes for half an hour gives us a total of 90 minutes. Next, we're going to write the ratio of time spent in line to the time spent on the ride. You always want to go in the order that you read the question. So we're going to start with the time in line, and we're comparing it. Remember, ratios are comparisons. We're comparing it to the time on the ride. The time in line in the form of minutes is 90 minutes, so we'll put the 90 at the top of our ratio, in the numerator of our ratio. And then the time on the ride from the problem was 2 minutes. So we'll put the 2 in the denominator of our ratio. Now, you always want to simplify your ratios. So think of a number, mental math, that can go into both of these numbers evenly, and I think of 2. 2 will go into 2 one time, and 2 will go into 90 45 times. So our ratio is 45 to 1, or you could write it 45 colon 1. 45 to 1. This means the ratio of time spent in line to the time spent on the ride is 45 to 1. Let's try a third example together. This is called comparing ratios. We have a chart up here of Luis and Amber, and this compares their CD collections. We're going to determine who has a greater ratio of rock CDs to pop CDs. First, we're going to write the ratio. Now we are comparing rock to pop, so we're going to put the rock CDs on the top and the pop on the bottom of the ratio. First, let's start with Luis. Remember, we're comparing his rock CDs compared to his pop CDs. Luis has 9 rock CDs, and he has 24 pop CDs. Of course, you want to reduce or simplify your fraction. Also, since we're comparing, decimals would be the best form of the number to use to compare them. So let's go ahead and convert this fraction or this ratio to a decimal. So we'll do 9 divided by 24. Okay, you're going to need to add a decimal and a 0. Decimal goes straight up. 24 goes into 90 3 times. That gives us 72. And we'll have to borrow here. Okay, we'll add a 0. 24 goes into 180 7 times. Subtract. Add a 0, and 24 goes into 120 5 times. That would be 120. So Luis's ratio of rock CDs to pop CDs can be represented by 9 over 24, or 0.375. Now let's look at Amber's ratio of rock to pop CDs. She owns 42 rock CDs, and she owns 70 pop CDs. Again, we're going to convert this to a decimal, and I'll do my work over here. 42 divided by 70. Add a decimal and a 0, and your decimal goes straight up. 70 goes into 420 6 times. This is equivalent to 0.6. Now that we've converted them to decimals, we can compare who has the greater ratio. 0.6 is greater than 0.375, so Amber has the greater ratio of rock to pop CDs. Now it is your turn. Now it is your turn. Press pause on your computer and try these two questions. Okay, does Luis or Amber have a greater ratio of pop CDs to hip hop CDs is the first question. You would need to compare Amber's to Luis. And again, we're comparing pop to hip hop. So first let's start with Amber. Amber's pop CDs is 70 and her hip hop is 25. This can be converted to 2.8 as a decimal. And that's for Amber. I'll put Amber right here. Okay, and we'll do Luis in a different color. He has 24 pop CDs and 16 hip hop CDs. This converts to 1.5. So Amber has the greater ratio of pop CDs to hip hop CDs. Now let's look at the second question. Does Luis or Amber have a greater ratio of hip hop to rock? So now we're going to look at hip hop first over the rock. We're comparing hip hop to rock CDs. And let's start with Amber. Amber has 25 hip hop CDs and 42 rock CDs. This can be converted to 0.595. Now let's look at Luis. His will be 16 hip hop CDs compared to 9. That converts to 1.77. So the greater ratio of hip hop CDs to rock CDs is Luis. That concludes today's lesson. Thanks for watching.